Let me just open us up with a word of prayer. Father, we just come to you this morning, and we are expecting something from you in this session, just knowing that you have preordained the things that we're going to hear. Lord, I just ask for the right words to be spoken through me, and Lord, that all the glory and honor can go to you. We pray these things in your name. Amen. Okay, perfect. Great. I want to start by telling you a story. Many years ago, I had a job that I really loved. And there was an opportunity for me to take a new job and to step out of an area that I was comfortable with, that I was doing well, and to put myself in an opportunity where I would have the opportunity to grow and do new things and work for a much bigger organization. And so after a lot of prayer, I took this job at a much larger organization. And I was one of the senior directors in this new position. And it was a big risk for me to step into this space. And so I showed up for my first day of work, and I remember the executive director of the organization calling me into his office, and I hadn't even been shown to my office yet. And he sat down with me, and he gave me a piece of paper, and it was an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. And he said, "There's a lot of things going on with the organization, and I need you to sign this so that I can loop you in on what's going on." And I thought, what the heck? I just started this new job. I gave up a job that I loved to come here, and he's asking me to sign an NDA. And he said, "You can't even tell your wife about the things that we're going to share with you." And so I signed the NDA, and then he proceeded to tell me that the organization was in the middle of being acquired. And it was my first sign that I had taken a job at a dysfunctional organization. "75% of U.S. employees say that they have worked at a toxic workplace. 87% report that toxicity has negatively affected their mental health. And 1 in 5 employees currently experience toxic work conditions. 54% of workers have quit their job due to a negative work environment. 22% of workers say their mental health has been harmed by their workplace." I found in a lot of different conferences and different places that I've been, there's not a lot of conversations about the toxic workplace. And when I worked with this organization, there were a lot of wounds that were created. There was a lot of harm that happened. And so what I want to do today is bring you a conversation about what the toxic workplace looks like and things that we can do to make our workplace not toxic. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. First of all, I'm a follower of Christ. I'm a husband, a father, and I'm the CEO of Neighbor Health Center, which is a FQHC lookalike in Raleigh, North Carolina. These are listed in order of importance of the things that are most important to me in my life, and I'll share a little bit more about that later. I also want to preface this conversation that I don't have it all figured out. And so I'm not coming to you as an expert. I'm coming to you from somebody that has experienced a lot of different things in my career, and I'm still figuring it out. And probably I will be on my deathbed not having things figured out. And I think that's the way that the Lord wants us to be, so that we're always humbled and dependent on Him. And the last thing I want to share is that I've worked at a toxic environment. And so this organization that I worked with, where I took the step out of what was comfortable, and my boss told me on the first day that the company was being acquired, and this was a faith-based organization, and that was the beginning of a time for me in a season of 3.5 years of experiencing things I've never experienced in the workplace before. I will share a couple of stories of things that I experienced, but I want to fast forward to the end of that story. The end of that story resulted in me being in a place in my career where I was afraid every single day that I was going to be fired. It was a place where everybody was talking behind closed doors, and you never knew what end was up or what reality was, because you would be told one thing to your face, but in reality something else was happening. I don't know if any of you have heard of this concept of the meeting after meetings. So we would have executive team meetings, and it would seem like everything was okay in the meeting, but then afterwards everybody scatters to their offices in little groups, and there's this meeting after the meeting of people talking about what they really felt. And that's a really yucky feeling to be in that type of workplace. I want to be really candid with you in this conversation because I believe as believers we need to have transparency with each other of the struggles that we have gone through. One, so people can learn from them, and two, if you've ever been in that place or you're in that place, you know it's okay. And there's other people that have gone through that. What ended up happening is this toxic work environment really hindered my mental health. It got to a point where my doctor told me I needed to take FMLA and take some time to recover from that. My mental health was damaged. My physical health was suffering from it, and I had to find a way out. Our conversations about a countercultural leadership model that builds trust, improves staff retention, and fosters a culture of excellence. And that's what we're driving for. This is important because the Lord calls believers to excellence, not for pride or perfectionism, but to reflect His character, serve wholeheartedly, and act as diligent witnesses. This biblical excellence involves doing all work, whether personal, professional, or spiritual, as for God rather than for man, characterized by diligence and moral integrity. The Lord calls us to do something different in the workplace, especially as leaders. I was looking at the people that signed up for this session, and most of the people have some type of management role in their organization. And so you have people that are reporting to you. This session is not just for if you're the CEO of an organization. This session is for everybody. Because no matter if you are managing one person or you're supervising or you have a whole organization, these principles can apply to you. These principles are things that I have been working on for a lot of years in different roles, and they're something that I pass down to my management team because I think they're really important. I think that as believers, we are called to a different standard. And as people who manage others, that's a really important responsibility that has been laid on us. And we have the opportunity to make the experience for our staff phenomenal or to make it really terrible. And there's got to be a lot of intentionality that goes into how we lead our teams. Organizations with strong cultures see employees almost 4 times more likely to stay with their company. 69% say culture gave them a competitive edge during times of disruption. Highly engaged business units show 21% greater profitability and 59% less turnover. 63% of employees say culture directly impact success. Statistics are important, and so I want to talk about these because when we take time to invest in the culture of our organization, it has direct results. Neighbor Health Center, I've been the CEO for a little over 4 years, and we've gone through some transitions of, when I stepped in, I thought the culture was really good because everybody was really happy all the time. And but as I got in to the organization, I realized, okay, the culture isn't that great, and there's a lot of work that has to be done here because there was never really a foundation of, hey, this is what the culture of this organization needs to be. Neighbor Health Center grew really fast, and so we're not a large organization, but we're only 8 years old. And in 8 years, we went from 3-4 staff members to 85 staff members. That was like in the first 6 years of the organization. And so there wasn't these foundational principles put down of what the culture looks like. I remember my very second day at the organization as the CEO, I had 5 people come up to me separately and unaware that the others were doing it to tell me about a provider that needed to be fired immediately. And of the bad culture that this provider was causing, and it was true. When I dug into it, it was reality. But this provider had been with the organization for 3 years and had been allowed to do things that had really negatively impacted the culture of the organization. And so, when we really invest in the culture of an organization, it has a direct impact on the staff satisfaction. And any of you that think about turnover in your organization, I think about provider turnover a lot. We've estimated that every time we lose a provider with us, it costs us about $500,000. That's both in lost revenue and recruitment. It's expensive to lose providers. Every staff has a value to what they bring to the organization and not having them with the organization. And so it's important that we take time to build the culture of our organization because we want to retain really good staff, and we don't want staff to leave because they're not happy with the culture of the organization. Simon Sinek, I love his stuff. He says, customers will never love the company until the employees love it first. A year and a half ago, a lot of employees did not love Neighbor Health Center. And again, I just being very, very transparent. And I would love to say, stand up here and say, as the CEO, I came in immediately and made everything so much better and the culture changed overnight, but it doesn't. It takes time. It takes intentionality. It takes digging into different things. And a year and a half ago, Neighbor Health Center was on the brink of closing down, quite honestly. We had received, a ton of COVID funding, which some of you in leadership experienced that. And so prior to me joining the organization, I came at the end of COVID, but there was all this money in the bank account, so we overhired. And then all of a sudden we found ourselves in a place about 2.5 years ago where there was no more COVID funding. And we had all of these staff, and we really hadn't been forced to operationalize the organization and figure out how to best use our staff. And so we were bloated with staff. And so we got to the point, we actually, a year and a half ago, just over a year ago, we did a 20% staff reduction in the organization. And that was the hardest thing that I've ever done in my career. We had to let go staff that had been with the organization since the very beginning, staff that were just really big-hearted people. But we had to identify, what does the organization need? Because if we didn't make that decision, then we would be laying off 85 staff members the next month because we wouldn't have enough money to pay them. That decision was the best decision that we've ever made as an organization. And but as you can imagine, the staff morale was really low during that time. And staff weren't happy. The culture wasn't great because we were trying all these other things to keep the organization together, and they weren't working. And we were having a lot of turnover in the organization because people were getting nervous about what's happening. And we weren't really focused on the culture as much. We were focused on trying to keep our doors open. And so a lot of our staff didn't love the organization. And so when you look at your team, you have to really focus on the staff have to love the organization if you want your patients to love it, if you want your community to love it. And so I'm really excited to say that now, a year and a half later, our staff really love the organization, and we've had a lot of improvement in that area. But how leadership practices shape our workplace culture. Culture shapes by what the leader models, not by what they say. I think back to that job of that toxic environment that I was in. The executive director would say a lot of things, but he wouldn't follow up with what he did. and there wasn't a lot of follow through. And so you really doubted what he said. But it's so important that that we say, that we model what we say, and we don't just say things, we actually do that. Daily decisions and behaviors communicate what is truly valued. I will tell you, in your organization, what you should truly value is your people, your staff. And so the decisions that you make and the way that you interact with your team needs to show that. One of the things that I do every day, no matter how busy my day is, we've got one clinic, we have one large clinic, but I always take time every day to walk the clinic and talk to the staff and to ask them how they're doing. And that's what I value. I value the people in the organization. I value knowing how our front desk team is doing. We've got 200 patients checking in today, and that's more than we normally have. I need to go check on them and see how they're doing. I need to go talk to our providers and talk to our MAs. But it's so important that we take that time and we show what we truly value. Silence and avoidance can ultimately normalize unhealthy behaviors. So we had that organization that I was sharing about. There was a lot of avoidance of talking about what the real issues are. And when I joined Neighbor Health, I remember at the time, Lance Luttrell, who a lot of you know, he was our fractional COO. And so he was doing that first week, we had the executive team together, and he was doing some things on conflict resolution. And so he asked everybody on the team who likes conflict. And I was the only one that raised my hand of that team. And I thought, oh man, we've got some work to do. But it's so important that we learn to press into conflict, because when we press into conflict, we're going to get to the root of the issues really quick, and we're not going to avoid the things that really matter and getting down to the heart of thing. Now my executive team loves conflict. We meet every week. And the dynamics of the team is so exciting, because when somebody disagrees with something, they will share that in a very constructive and a very loving and kind way, but they're going to share that. And what it has done of having that mentality of where healthy conflict is good, has raised the bar of the entire team. And so everybody knows, hey, if I disagree with something, I can share it and we can discuss it. And my team presses back on me all the time and disagrees with me about things. And what that does is it sharpens me, and it allows me to be a better leader for them. And so when we don't avoid conflict, but we press into it, the results are phenomenal. And the people that don't like conflict in your organization, they're going to get weeded out. Because if they're not willing to press into those things with you and to accomplish the things, then they're going to find somewhere else to go. And that's okay. That's okay to do that. The other thing, I talked about the meetings after the meetings. That's not allowed at my organization. And so our rule is, if you have something to say, you say it in the meeting, and we resolve it, we hash through it at that time. And what that's done with our leadership is it's created this culture of nobody having insecurities. Nobody's worrying about, are other people talking about what I said in the meeting, or they disagreed with me. Everybody can leave that meeting feeling secure. Some examples of unintentional shaping. Leaders working long hours. This signals burnout is expected. I want to park on this for a minute. The toxic workplace that I worked for, I remember the executive director would go home after work. He would probably leave work around 7 o'clock at night. And probably around 11 o'clock at night, he would start up again. And the emails from 11 o'clock until 2 a.m. every day would start coming through. And I remember my phone would be by my bed, and I'm trying to sleep, and I just hear ding, ding all night long. And that created two things in me. One, it created this sense of I wasn't working hard enough. And two, it created this anxiety of, I need to be up now answering these emails from him. And it was really unhealthy. And by 7 o'clock in the morning, I would get a text message from him if I hadn't responded to an email. And so it's so important as leaders that we model a good work-life balance. And I don't think in our culture today we do that very well. So often we think that if I work harder, I'm going to accomplish more. And sometimes we say, oh, it's just for this season. It's just for this season that I need to put in, 12-hour days, 15-hour days, but it will get better. But what happens is that becomes the norm. And then we get this destructive culture in our organization. And so when I started at Neighbor Health Center, I made it very clear that we work from 8 o'clock until 5 o'clock. That's our time. And I had a couple of my executive staff that put in those 10, 12-hour days consistently, and would get on their computers on the weekend. And so I implemented time cards for all of my salaried staff members. And I said, you need to fill out time cards so I can monitor that you're not working too much. And that really helped align the expectations of the teams. Because then I could have conversations with them and say, hey, why are you putting in this many hours? Maybe your workload is too much. Maybe your expectations of yourself is too much. But we need to align this so that you can have good work-life balance. It also went for some of our providers. We had a couple of providers when I started who had almost never taken vacations. We had one provider with this PTO bank that was just unreal. I mean, he had so many PTO hours saved up because he never took vacation. He never took care of himself. And so those were some conversations that I really had to have with the providers of saying, you have to have good work-life balance. You have to take care of yourselves. You have to use your PTO because it's so important that we have a culture where we normalize what is the expectation of our job. Now, I shared with you at the very beginning a little bit about me, and I shared with you the priorities of things in my life with God, my wife, my son, and then work was down there. And I share this concept with every new staff member that comes on to our organization. And I sit down with them, I meet with every new employee on their first day, just for a short conversation. And I tell them, I want you to know Neighbor Health is not your number one priority. And that's my expectation. Jobs come and go in our careers, and they're not the most important things in our lives. I had a season in my life where my job took precedent over my marriage, where it took precedent over my family, and I worked those long hours and just thinking, this is just a season, but the season turned into years. And you know who suffered at the end of that day? My family suffered. My relationship with my wife suffered. And I look back at it, and I look back at that season and think, I absolutely killed myself for this organization. And at the end of the day, I didn't even get a gold star for that. Nobody remembers me in that organization. I have no legacy in that organization where people say, Daniel did this when he was here. But you know who remembers? My family remembers. And so as leaders, as managers, as employees, it's so important that we get our priorities right. I love Neighbor Health Center. I love being the CEO there. I tell everybody I'd be happy if this was my job that I get to retire from. And I'm young, so I've got some years left. But my job satisfaction is extreme, but you never know what the Lord has planned. You don't know. Jobs come and go. So your organization cannot be the biggest priority in your life. And you have to show that by example, and you have to lead your team in that way. And you have to hold them accountable to make sure that they have good work-life balance. Leaders avoid conflict. Leaders who avoid conflict, that encourage gossip, and unresolved tension. So I shared with you about the big staff reduction that we did last year. And you can imagine the gossip in the organization was rampant. We were trying to contain things the best that we could, but we had some very disgruntled employees who didn't get cut. They were the ones that left, and we did a 20% staff cut, and we saw about another 15% that left in the next 3 months from the organization. And the 15% that left were the disgruntled employees that were just not happy because their friend lost their job or because they didn't believe in the decisions that the leadership was making for the sake of the organization. In fact, I had one employee that tried to go to the board to get me fired during that time because they thought they could do it better, and that I was doing a terrible job. Thankfully, I have a great board that had my back, and that wasn't an issue. But there was a specific group of MAs during that time that just the gossip was rampant. And so they were taking the words of some of the providers that were not happy and spreading them around, and none of them were talking to their supervisor about their concerns. None of them were coming and talking to me, but they were all talking about each other. And so what I did is I called a meeting of all the MAs. And we had about 15 MAs, and they came into the room. And I sat them down, and this was after kind of the final people that were disgruntled with the organization had left. So a lot of the instigators of the gossip weren't there. But I sat the group that was left down, and I said, hey, I want you to know that I know what you guys are saying. And let me repeat some of the things that I've heard. Second, I want you to know that is unacceptable. And that's not the type of organization that we are. Now, nobody should be silenced because they are frustrated. Nobody should be told that they can't express their emotions or they can't express their opinion, but there's appropriate ways to do that. And so we said, hey, if you are frustrated about something, you go to your supervisor. You have a phenomenal supervisor who cares about you, and they want to know these things. If you don't want to do that, my door's always open. You can come and talk to me about it. But we will not tolerate you going behind anybody's back and gossiping, because that just destroys the morale of the organization and it creates really bad culture. And if you feel like you can't be here and you can't do that, that's okay. We're okay if you want to find a job somewhere else. Nobody's holding you captive here. But if you're going to be here and you're going to be a part of this team, you need to be a part of the team. And after that time, two things happened. One, the gossip completely stopped. Just 100% stopped. Because we took it seriously. We did not skirt around it. We did not avoid it. We just brought it out straight up, said this is what's going on, can't happen. The other thing that happened was a couple of MAs who actually really cared about the organization, they started going to their supervisor with frustrations. And it created a really good relationship between those MAs and the supervisor was able to constructively bring things to our attention that created change for the MAs in an appropriate way. And so when there is conflict, as leaders, we have to engage in it. We have to press into it. And then leaders rewarding outputs. Staff may cut corners or disengage from collaboration. And so we can't reward only the outputs. The consequences of transitional leadership on trust, morale, and staff retention. Transitional leadership is focusing on tasks, metrics, and compliance. It has little attention to relational trust, meaning, or long-term development. So it can get so easy, especially when we're struggling with hitting our visit numbers or struggling with different metrics that we're doing, to allow those things to drive us and to totally forget that we have this team of people that we need to do that work. I tell my staff all the time that we couldn't do the work without them. If my MA is up and quit, or my front desk up and quit, we couldn't run a clinic. If my providers left, we couldn't run a clinic. It is the people doing the work that make it all happen. And so we have to make sure that we are building relational trust, meaning, and long-term development with them. The consequences, if we don't do this, is erosion in trust, low morale, and high turnover. And I share with you, turnover is expensive, and it is so hard to replace those positions. And if you don't have enough providers, you're not going to be able to see enough patients. If you don't have enough front desk staff, then you're going to get this pile up of patients coming in, and they're all going to be, your Google reviews are not going to be great because they're going to be complaining about the wait time or the process. So countercultural leadership model is one that fosters trust, excellence, and long-term staff engagement. I've started to share some of these principles with you. And my hope is that you can just take away a nugget from this. I know this is a lot of information, but my hope is that there's a nugget that you can take away. Simon Sinek again says, leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge. It is about our people. And I've said this again and again, but it is about taking care of our people. I had an MA that was passing by my office, and I'm a huge coffee fan. I love coffee. I can drink coffee all day long. Even before I go to bed, I could drink a cup of coffee, and I just really enjoy it. And so I have an espresso machine in my office, and a part of my ministry is making coffees for people in the office. And so whenever I do a one-on-one with any of my direct reports, if they want a coffee, I'll make them a coffee, and I'll even clean their cup for them afterwards. I just love doing that, and sharing something I love with the people in the office. And one of our front desk staff came by the office, and she kind of peeked in, and she's like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's my Nespresso machine." I said, "You want a coffee?" And she's like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yes." And so I made her a coffee, and then we got to sit and chat while we drank our coffee. And that was just, it was a moment, a blip in my day to connect with this front desk staff and to get to know her better and to show her that, hey, the most important thing for me right now is you in front of me. And we can get so distracted by meetings, we can get so distracted by projects and deadlines that we forget about the people. And when we refocus our attention and we focus on our people, the outputs are going to be just phenomenal. The counterculture, it's counterculture because it flips the script. Instead of get results, then care for people, we care for people, and the results will follow. We've done a lot of work. I've got such a great HR director, and she is so passionate about our people, and she brings these ideas to us of ways that we can care for our staff better. And she has just helped us really understand how to care for our staff. And so in this last year, as we've rebuilt our team, rebuilt some of our management, we've learned to care for people. And what we're seeing results. So I shared with you that we did this 20% staff reduction, and about another 15% followed from that. So, we went from 85 employees to, about 50 employees, 48 employees in a matter of 3 months. And we learned a couple of interesting things. Number one, it forced us to relook at our processes and systems because we didn't reduce the number of patients that we were caring for. In fact, we increased. We saw more patients coming, but we redid our processes and systems, and it was phenomenal. We were doing more work with less people. And we didn't realize the manpower waste that we had in the organization until we were forced to go through that to save the organization. But in that, we've also learned to care for our staff, and our turnover rate is at an all-time low in the organization. We have hired more providers in this last year, and really phenomenal providers, and we're caring for them. Our front desk staff is bigger than it's ever been. Our MA staff is bigger than it's ever been. And a year ago, this time, or a year ago, when we did these staff reductions, we were seeing about 100 to 110 patients a day in our clinic, and now we're seeing over 200 patients a day with less staff members. And one of my favorite parts of my job is to do tours for community members and potential donors, and it's so cool to me that when I get to walk behind the scenes with a potential partner and tell them we've got 200 plus patients on the schedule today, our waiting room doesn't have more than 5 or 6 people in the waiting room. And when you walk behind in the clinic, it's quiet because we have really worked on our processes and systems, and we have really worked on caring for our staff. And now the results that we're getting is phenomenal workflow, and staff that are passionate about their job, and staff that are stepping up to the plate and doing things that we didn't even know that they were capable of doing. 3 pillars of this model is trust building, empowerment and growth, and mission alignment. Trust building is leaders practice consistency, integrity, and vulnerability. Those things are really important, especially being vulnerable with your staff. I try to model that from the top down, and I try to infuse that with our managers of, hey, we don't have it all figured out. I started at the beginning of this saying, I don't have it figured out. I'm learning as I go, and I will never have it figured out, and none of us will. But we need to be vulnerable with our staff and say, I don't have it all figured out. I don't know the answers to all the problems. And when we tell our staff that, they're going to trust us. Our staff, we think that our staff expect us to have it all figured out, but what they really want is somebody who's authentic and real. And so it's more important that we focus on being authentic and real than putting on this facade that we have it all figured out. Empowerment and growth. Leaders create pathways to staff development and autonomy. Now, I shared with you that I meet with every new employee on their first day, and I share with them multiple things. The second thing that I share with them is that I understand that neighbor health is most likely a stepping stone on their career journey. And we want to be the best partner to them through that journey. And so we want to understand, what are their career goals? What do they want to do with their life? And then how can we partner with them in that? And again, that's not our cultural norm. Our cultural norm is like getting employees and just trying to get as much out of them and then being frustrated when they quit. If any of you have a lot of turnover in your MAs like we do, it's not because they're dissatisfied, but they all come in and do a year or two and then they go off to medical school. And so, we have this opportunity to be an integral part of their journey and to infuse some really amazing principles in them along the way. And so when we take that approach and look at our staff and even tell them on their first day, like, hey, what do you want to accomplish? How can we partner with you? They become even more engaged and more excited about the work. And then mission alignment. Leaders anchor daily decisions and values, making work meaningful. I don't spend a lot of time in our clinic. I spend a little bit of time every day, but we have majority of our staff spend all their day in our clinic. But it's so important that we help keep the mission of the organization in front of our staff all the time. And making sure that they understand why we are here and why we do what we do. Organizations that invest in relational trust and growth see 20 to 30% better retention and stronger team performance. Man, I see this right now in our organization. I see this. Strategies to cultivate healthy, value-driven culture. Richard Branson says, take care of your employees and they'll take care of your business. Establish feedback loops, 360 reviews, anonymous surveys, and regular check-ins. And so we have some expectations in our organization. I meet one-on-one with every one of my direct reports every week. And, that has become such the joy of my time. And so that's 8 hours a week that I have set aside to meet with my direct reports. I will tell you that is the best use of my time because I'm creating relational value with them, and we are creating the way that we work together. None of my direct reports have any issue giving me constructive feedback. I have one of my director of development. She has a form that she will send me the day before with the things that she wants to talk about in that day. And in that form, every time she's got a column in there to give me constructive feedback. And so 2 weeks ago, she put in there that, she listened to a podcast I did, and she said, I noticed you mispronounced this word in your podcast. I love that my staff have that freedom, my direct reports have that freedom to come to me, and they're so invested in my growth and my development that they will tell me when I mispronounce a word. Others of my direct reports will come to me if I hurt their feelings, or if they felt like I didn't handle a situation right, or have a conversation. And so a conversation in a loving way with somebody, we need those feedback loops. And we can do that with all of our direct reports. You might have a larger team and think, okay, I can't meet one-on-one with them every week, but even if you spend 15 minutes every other week, and they know that they've got that designated time with you, it's going to make a difference. Because when you get into a situation of conflict, when you get in a situation where you have to hash through some urgent things, you're going to have each other's back. We went through some things in this last year where we had to do staff reductions and whatnot, and my team had my back. When this individual went to the board and wanted to get me replaced, my team had my back. And on the flip side, I have their back as well. And so creating those feedback loops are so incredibly important. We do an anonymous survey every quarter, and we share those results with staff. Even if they're not great results, we share them with staff, and we share with them what we're going to do to work on the things that they brought up. Normalize recognitions, build rituals of gratitude, weekly shout outs, handwritten notes, team celebrations. It's so important that we integrate these things into the rituals of our organization. How are we recognizing our staff? We have a part of our executive team meeting. We meet for a couple hours every week, and a piece in there is to recognize some really great things that we saw in our staff. And then we take that and we share those things in our morning huddle in the next day with our entire staff. These are some great things that we saw from our team this week. And then increase transparency, explain the why behind the decisions, not just the what. And I think as leaders, we fail at this constantly. We say, we've gone through all this work, we know why we're making these hard decisions, and we're implementing them, but we don't take that extra time to tell our staff why. At our, we do an all-staff meeting every quarter, and at our January all-staff meeting, I recapped the year before. And I talked about the really ugly things that we went through as an organization, the staff reductions, talked about the things that we've done to right-size the organizations and where we're going this year, and I was extremely transparent. And then I shared the why. Why did we make these decisions? Why were these things important? What were our mistakes in that? What could we have done better? And it created this deeper level of transparency. And if we want buy-in from our team and we want buy-in from our staff, we need to have that level of transparency with them. Model values daily. Leaders should consistently embody organizational values. We've got 5 values as an organization. We try to filter everything through that, and we try to model through those values. Protect rhythms of rest, encourage PTO, respect boundaries, and model healthy work-life balance. I tell every new provider that comes on with us, especially those that have kids, I reiterate, your family is the most important thing. And if you wake up in the morning and you have a sick kid and you need to call out, you call out and you take your sick time, you take your PTO, because your family is the most important thing. And you don't need to worry about the patients that were on your schedule to that day. That's our job to take care of that. You need to pick up the phone or send that text, say, I can't make it in today, I've got a sick kid, let us do the rest. But you have to have the freedom to do that. And when you have providers and you have staff that know that we value the things that are most important in their lives, they're going to be more present at work. And they're going to be more flexible when we ask them to pick up an extra day later on because somebody else is out. Make the hard decisions quickly. This is something that I have failed at, and I've seen the results of it, and this is something my wife reminds me consistently when I come and I start complaining about something at work, and she says, you got to make that decision quicker. You've been complaining about this for 6 months, do something about it. And so I have learned I've tried to make decisions quicker, because when you know the right thing to do, and you've already gone through the assessment process, you need to make that decision. And for example, the area that I consistently have struggled at is with staff. And so we had a specific person when I was with the organization that was in a leadership role that was a great person, but not in the right role. And so I said, I can mentor this person into this role and make them better at this. And so I spent a year mentoring them and working with them and trying to equip them for that role. And there was no improvement. And in fact, staff were getting more frustrated with them as a leader, and we were seeing staff turnover because of their lack of leadership. And I knew that they were a really great person, but in the wrong role. But I thought, I can fix this, I can do it. And so another 6 months, I said, hey, let's keep working on it, let's work harder. And more people quit during that time. And so finally, I had to remove this person from their role and put them into a different role. It took me a year and a half to make that decision that I knew within 1 month of starting my job as a CEO that getting them out of that role was the right thing to do. But it took me a year and a half to make that decision. And it caused staff turnover. It caused that person to be frustrated because they felt like a failure. That person is still with our organization in a different role, and they're happier than they've ever been before. And now we've gotten somebody, the right person, in that right role. Year and a half ago, I was faced with this decision with another one of our executive leadership team where they just had capped out on what they were doing, in their ability to serve the organization. They were making more and more mistakes, and we were trying to have some constructive conversations, but they weren't responding well. And so this time, it only took me 6 months to make that decision. So I got better at it, but I knew within a couple of weeks of some alarms going off that they needed to go. And so it's so important that, especially when it comes to staff, we make those decisions quickly. About 8 months ago, we had a new MA supervisor that did a terrible job. And I knew within that first day of meeting with him in my one-on-one that he was not the right person for the right role. And I told his supervisor, I've got concerns. And then after a week, we started having complaints from our MAs. And so we decided within 3 weeks to let that person go. And it was the best decision that we make, because the MAs said, you take us seriously. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for supporting our concerns. And we were able to get somebody that was not the right person for the organization out. You have to make those hard decisions quickly. So incredibly important. And the last thing is stomp out bad culture. And when I started at Neighbor Health, again, it was a lot smaller, and there was this culture of we're all family, and we just we just love each other and we need to make decisions as a whole group. And when there were 8 employees, it was really easy for everybody to gather and to make decisions as a group together. But when you're getting up to 80 employees, you can't do that. And your leadership structure looks different. But some people that were with the organization early on, as the organization grew, they did not want to have that model. And so it created bad culture. And so you have to address those things and stomp out bad culture. Commit to actionable steps. We're coming to the end of this. I want to talk about this, Atomic Habits. I really don't share books very often, but I read this book last year, and this is probably one of the books that has had the most impact on me personally, because I'm a person that thinks, if I'm going to make a change, if there's something I need to work on, I want 100% change tomorrow. And then I would fail. And then I'm like, I failed, let me try again, and 100% change. But in Atomic Habits, James Clear talks about making 1% changes. And he gives the example of an airplane. He said if an airplane is on track for its destination, but it makes a 1% course change at the beginning, it doesn't look like very much, but 5 hours later, it's in a whole different state or a whole different country. And so when we focus on making those 1% changes, those things that we can actually do, the outcome is going to be significantly different. And so if you haven't read this book, I would encourage it. For my personality, it was really good for me. It really calmed me down and allowed me to focus on the small things that I could actually change. But this in our workplace, I just gave you guys a lot of information, but if you even pick one thing from this and say, here's a 1% change that I want to make, the results are going to be phenomenal down the road. Culture doesn't change by accident. It changes because leaders choose to lead with intention, trust, and value. I hope that this was beneficial to you guys. I hope that you gleaned something from it. I love talking about my failures and sharing those things. And I think that as believers, we need to share our failures with people. We just have just a minute or two if there's any questions. I'll be around after. My email address is there. You can also find me through the app if you have any questions. And as promised to our leaders here, there's the survey, so you guys can scan that. But just 1 or 2 minutes if there's any questions, I'd love to answer. Yes?
So I was really intrigued by your conversation about having your executives mark their time. I really think that's fascinating and really innovative. I'm curious, are you watching the provider's time for after-hours notes about and adjusting their schedule?
Great question. So I'll repeat the question. The question is, are we also watching our after-hour times for our providers? And so that's called their pajama time. And yes, we are watching pajama time for our providers. We're on Epic, so it gives us great reports that we can pull those reports and see what they're doing. So we typically don't adjust their schedules based on that. We will do coaching with them. What things can we do during their day to help them out? We're now using AI scribes, which has been life-changing for them. So we've been doing that for about a month now. So we're excited to look at that pajama time. According to our providers, their pajama time is way less now. So great question. But yes, that is equally as important. Absolutely. And a lot of time it's not reducing their schedules, it's coaching that they need.
And since you reduce the executive hours, what have you done about the change?
Yeah, so the question was, since we've reduced executive hours, what do we notice about the change? I've noticed that we've taken things off of their plates that aren't the priorities. So I do a lot of helping them reprioritize what are the most important things, because I'm the one that has to dictate that for them. And so we'll reevaluate what's more important. We'll look at efficiencies for them. And most of the time, we've got a list of 10 things that we need to do. And what really matters is like 5 of them. And so we have a conversation and say, hey, these other 5 don't matter. Let's put them in we call it our parking lot. Let's put them in the parking lot. Let's revisit in 6 months and see if your bandwidth has changed and we can bring these back in, or if something changes, we can do that. But let's have an honest conversation about what matters the most. Let's take one last question.
about leading from the CEO perspective, but your first route, it sounded like it's kind of from the under perspective. Do you have any thoughts for people who are not in charge?
Such a great question. So her question was, do I have any thoughts about somebody that's maybe, let's say, more middle management, that's not in the CEO perspective? So you've got two different things going on. You may be in a situation where the workplace culture isn't great, but you've got to work on that. But you're also managing people. And so when I was in that position, my direct reports, I had a team of about 6 people in that position. It changed over, I absorbed some other departments, so it was at that point that I had 15 at one time, but none of them actually knew of what was going on with the organization. And so I really led them differently than how I was being led. And so I said, hey, these are the principles that matter. So I led them the way that with these values that I shared with you. I think it depends on the type of organization that you're in. If you're in an organization where you have a good relationship with your supervisor, these type of conversations are really important. And it's good to have these conversations and to say, hey, here's some things that I would like to see or I'd like to do differently. Sometimes those don't go well and you realize maybe you're not in the best organization. And I have to say that very honestly. All of us are working, most of us are working for a Christian clinic. Just because you're a Christian clinic doesn't mean that it's perfect and they have it all figured out. We sure didn't at Neighbor Health Center. So please take a few minutes before you leave to fill out the survey. I love constructive feedback. So if there's things that I could do different or better, I want to know about that, and I want the conference to know about that. But I'm around too if you have questions. So thank you guys. Really appreciate your time.